Hi everyone, this is my submission video for the impressioning quest for black belt for LPU. So to start off with the important parts, here is the actual lock that I'm submitting for black belt. It is a master number 3. It was sent to me with no key by DuckFacts, and he can confirm that there was no key included in the package. And here is the key I generated for this lock. And it does work. So there you go. The other keys on this ring are my first 2 attempts to impression this lock, which failed. You can see that they are somewhat similar to my working key, but they were not right. Ended up filing number 2 in particular down too far. Number 1 was filed down too far, I think, and then 3 and 4 were not filed enough. So my first couple attempts did not work, but number 3, I did get a working key there. So that's the important part. If you don't want to watch the rest of the video, that's all you really need to see. I was going to take a little bit of time, though, to talk about how I did the impressioning and what I learned along the way, because I did learn a lot of lessons going through this. So to start with, my tools, what I was using. So for my impressioning handle, I had a dedicated impressioning handle that I got from Rubber Band on Hooligan keys. So this is what I was using. You can see I used it quite a bit, and the coating is starting to come off a little bit. But this was a really great impressioning handle. Being able to put some rotational pressure on it, separate, and then jiggling was super helpful. I haven't tried impressioning with something like a pair of locking pliers, but I might give it a shot just to see what it's like. But I really liked this handle a lot. It was really neat. For my files, so my main file was right here. It's a number 4 grommet file. You can see it's well used. It's got a lot of brass dust in it. I need to get something better to clean it off with, because to clean it, I was just using this old toothbrush, and it doesn't work real great. So I need to clean my file very well. I also was using this triangular file, but just the flat sides, because I was quite frequently ending up with really sharp peaks on my keys that needed to be filed down flat so that they would not get stuck in the lock. And then I've got some sandpaper here. I think this is 1000 grit sandpaper. It's pretty fine. And I was using this to do key prep, to make my initial marks, which was something I didn't start doing until later on, but I should have started doing in the beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then this tub is just, you can see my key graveyard in here. These were all keys that either broke, you can see this one right here is cracked, or just plain didn't work, and then I was filing over this tub, so it's full of brass dust, so I need to clean this out. Those were my main tools right there. To hold the locks, I was just using my regular picking vise. You can see all the brass dust on it. I need to clean this thing really bad. But all the brass dust that ended up on top of this as I was inserting the keys. And then last, I was using also this magnifier right here that I got from MBA USA. I didn't use this until the very last lock I impressioned. I should have gotten a magnifier much earlier, or done some kind of magnification setup, because it actually really did help quite a bit. I would not want to keep going without a magnifier at this point after using one, so that was really great. Okay, so how I started. So I got Rubber Band. I asked him to send me a lock and some blanks. So he sent me this Yale wafer lock right here and a whole bunch of blanks to get started with. So this was the first lock that I impressioned. This is the key that I made for that lock, and this one does work. So that one was pretty good. This took me about 10 keys to generate one working key here. The key for this one was sealed in this envelope here. I opened it on another video, but I don't think I'm going to post it because I'm not submitting with this lock. So but you can see there's the key on the top versus what I made, and I am still shocked that my key worked, because you can very clearly see, I think this has 5 cuts on it, or either it's got 5 cuts or it's got 2 in the front and 2 in the back and that gap in the middle. I'm not 100% sure. But my key, you can see my first cut in particular is way in the wrong spot, and it's really wide compared to how wide it should have been. I think it only worked because I ended up with this peak here in the front, and the first wafer was also a really high lift, so it still functioned correctly. So I'm somewhat surprised this worked, but it did work. But once I saw what the actual key looked like, I knew I was not very good at this, and I have a ways to go to develop some skill. So I actually had some blanks left over. So I went on eBay and I found a bunch of keyless Yale wafer locks that were exactly the same as the one that Rubber Band had sent me. So I used, there's still some brass dust coming out of these. I used my remaining keys and I generated this one, which has a really low lift or deep cut in the front. And I generated that on one of these. And let's see if it works. I'm 90% sure these are all keyed the same, because I think I've used this key to open more than one of these, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, there we go. So this key kind of works. It's not great. And I think it's partly because, there you go, that one. I think it's because when I was impressioning these, I sometimes wouldn't have the key. You can see like it kind of sticks out a little bit. So it works if it's hanging out. If I push it in all the way, it does not work. So this was another semi-successful attempt. It works, it opens the locks, but it's not great. And then I was out of blanks for these Yale locks. So, but they're all keyed alike anyway, it didn't really matter. So then I started working on pin tumbler locks, and I actually, I'm gonna grab it, I think it's funny. I bought a whole box of keyless master locks. There's some ones in here, some number 3s, there's a 101 down there, just a whole bunch. And there were some like odd keys thrown in here, but the keys are not associated with any particular lock. They were just kind of thrown in there in a pile. Some of them aren't even master lock keys, so that was interesting. And I impressioned 2 of those, and I'm working on another one right now, but this was one of them that was in there. And this was the working key that I generated for this one. So there you go. It's rough. You can obviously tell. That one does not work super great. And then this was one of my early attempts that I totally flubbed on. You can see it's a 4-pin lock, and I ended up with 3 cuts, so that was not fantastic. But that one did work. This one was actually much better. So here is there's the key I generated for this lock. It actually looks really similar to that one. I should try it and see if it works. That one does work right there. And this one, after I cut this key, I actually dug into the pile and I found this key right here, which works too. So this one actually came with a key that worked. But I didn't know that until after I had impressioned mine. Let me try this. This is going to be really fun if this works. No, it doesn't. Okay, good. So I did that one as well. And then obviously the one I'm using for my quest, which is this one right here from DuckFacts. So those are what I've done so far. I still have a ton, gobs and gobs of M1 blanks. So I'll be doing some more of these just to get more practice, because I'm still not really good at it. But kind of in general, you know, some of the things that I've learned along the way. Number one, when I first started, I was not prepping my blanks at all. I was just shoving them in and starting and seeing, you know, where the initial marks came out. That worked okay for the wafer locks because they marked really clearly, and it was usually on the edge of the key, so it was easy to see where they were. When I started doing the pin tumbler locks, that did not work anymore. Rubber band suggested that I prep the blanks by filing off the coating and using that fine sandpaper to really smooth them out to get my initial marks. So I started doing that, and that was hugely helpful. So that's number one, is prep your blanks or get some pre-cut or pre-marked blanks to start with. Some things that I constantly ran into that I'm still working on is, number one, my number one cut is oftentimes either in the wrong spot, it's too far back from the tip, or I've noticed I have a tendency to have my cuts travel backwards. So I end up in situations like this one where my cut is just going back this way, and I end up with this really sharp peak at the end, but then the cut's just not in the right spot. So I think that's probably like half of why my keys fails, because my number one cut is just in the wrong spot. So being really mindful of that. Some other things, in the very beginning, I was using way too much torsion. I was really cranking this to the side, which you don't need to do. That's how I broke a couple keys. You just really just need to hold it until it binds. And then the other thing I was doing is, when I was doing jiggling, I was really hammering it up and down to try to make the marks. You don't need to do that either. You can really just stick it in, just kind of do this, to paraphrase Bob Ross, just shake the devil out of it. You don't need to go hard, but you do need to, put some up and down on it. What I actually started doing, which was really helpful, is I would stick the key in, turn, and then I would, wiggle up and down, and then I'd go back, and then I'd push the key up and turn, and then wiggle up and down again. So I would kind of do maybe 5 seconds of each of those, and that really helped, I think, make some clear marks. Some really common mistakes that I made filing. Number one, I would see brass dust inside the grooves, and I would think that it was a mark, and I would file it. And sometimes I would do that, and then I started learning that if I see a shiny spot, like rub my finger over it, and half the time it would disappear because it was not actually a mark, it was just brass dust. The other thing is that on these pen tumbler locks in particular, I noticed that what I would get is, and it's really hard to see, but you can kind of see there's like a shiny groove or a shiny line that goes right down the middle here. And I think that's just because when you're inserting the key and pulling it out, those pins are rubbing just in the middle. And so what would end up happening is I'd get this kind of section in the middle that was a little bit more polished, versus my cuts, which were going, perpendicular to the way the key is. And then when I would be looking at this, I would see the light hitting that shiny line, and it would look like it was marking. And I've realized now that those were not marks. It was literally just the way that the light was hitting that shiny section of the key versus the edges. And that's really where the magnifier helped out a lot, because when I would see that, if I could look through the magnifier, I'd be able to see, okay, is there actually anything there, or are those kind of perpendicular grooves from my file still completely intact? And that's when I started noticing, no, that's just the light, the way the light's reflecting. There's really nothing there. The magnifier really helped me see, okay, there is marring on those marks, and that's where the pen was binding, and so that's where I need to file. So that was a huge help. I think that those are kind of the really big lessons. You don't need a lot of torsion, either rotationally or up and down. Be really careful of what you're filing. Wipe the key clean. Make sure you're not filing brass dust, and make sure you're not filing just a weird, section where the light's reflecting off the key. Those all kind of helped me really get this one, in just a few keys versus, my first one where I, like I said, took about 10 keys to make an actual working version of it. So I think that's about it. That's all I wanted to cover today. But, again, this was really interesting. I've still got 20 master locks over there and a whole bunch of blanks, so I'll keep going at this and try to get better. It still takes me maybe 45 minutes or so to generate a working key, depending on how deep I have to cut. Which I know people can do this much faster, especially on these easy locks that are just 4 pins and nothing fancy in them. So I'll keep at it, keep learning. But it was definitely an interesting experience, learning how to do impressioning. And it's kind of magic, to be honest. You know, you get to the end of it, it's like I made a key. I had a lock with no key, and I just stuck a key in a couple times and did some filing, and I made a key that actually works and opens this lock, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. So neat. And I think that's about it. So there you go. That's my my impressioning submission. If you didn't watch it, it's fine, but if you did, hope maybe I communicated what I learned and kind of my journey through learning how to impression. So thanks for watching.